So in this project, I'm taking this punky mesquite wood, and as you may have noticed, as soon as I touched it, it kind of wobbled. But this is it's a beautiful piece of mesquite. It is a lot of rot in it, so it's very punky. And besides all that punkiness, it had some bulging, some warping, and you can see the gap there in the middle. But it was just a beautiful piece, and I wanted to preserve it. So I got it from the sawmill, got a good price on it because it was in such bad condition. But I like projects like this. I like challenges, and anything that's funky like this, it's got a bunch of issues. I like to try and preserve it and just see what I can create out of it. So when I started this project, in my mind, I was thinking I was making a coffee table, but subsequently in the end, it ended up becoming a desk, a sit right at a desk. But I tried to figure out how I was going to do what I was going to do with it because of that bad bold, that wave was bending in the middle. It wasn't just that it had that curve, it was kind of warped, but it had a lot of beautiful character in it, and somehow I have to preserve it so that when I finish the product and I flatten it, it preserves all the different pieces that had so much character to it. So right here, I'm drawing a line, and I didn't really need to draw that line, but what I was trying to figure out was I'm going to have to square this table out. And I'm looking at the other side. Oh, maybe I can do something here. But you see the areas I'm touching is very punky in that area. And I didn't think it was going to look that great once I was done. And I need to square it off. But that little bump in the edge there, I wanted to keep that, right by where my hand is and where the ruler's at, the yardstick. That little bump was like character. And so I didn't want to cut all that off. So I'm trying to, how do I trim the edge? Because there was so much damage on the edge there. And I just wanted to be able to make a nice straight line without losing any character, especially that bump in the end in there, which is obviously some branch that used to exist there. So now here's my wife coming out and giving me some pointers as well, like what she thought was nice in the wood, and things that I try to preserve. So as I said, this is very punky wood. Had a lot of rot in it, a lot of bug holes in it. So it took a lot of work to clean it out. But I wanted to preserve all that. I'm going to fill all it in with black resin. It's just going to look beautiful when it's done. So when I was saying I didn't have to draw a line, really because I can just use a track saw. That becomes my line. But I was drawing lines just because I want to visualize what I'm doing. So now I'm just doing a whole bunch of measuring because the thinnest area of the board was 42 inches, and I'm trying to somehow end up with it being at least 42 inches in its length. At this point, I'm still thinking this is going to be a coffee table. Now the board itself, I think it was 1 1/4. I think that's what that says there, which is not too thick. And the fact that I was going to lose some thickness, was a challenge I just wasn't sure how I was going to deal with, because I need to end up with about 1 inch thick. In my mind, I need to have this at least 1 inch thick. So whatever I do with this, with all the flattening, so that was part of the reason why I ended up deciding that I was going to have to just make a resin river table out of this. When I first bought it, I thought maybe this will be easy. I can just flatten it out, put a C channel, and that would flatten out the whole board and keep it pure with very little resin here and there. But the more I looked over the piece of wood while it was sitting in my garage over the course of weeks, or I don't know, a couple months maybe, I realized I won't be able to straighten it out. As you can see there by the table, see how that bump, it's got that curve. So I knew I'm going to have to slice this thing somehow in half. And there you go, I've already sliced it, and I just noticed as I picked it up that corner piece fell off. That's how punky and those rotted sections. And so that little corner piece just fell off. Like, there you go. That just kind of messed up my whole shape I was going for. So I'm going to have to fix that. At least it was one solid piece, but there was a good line of rot there. So now I'm going to have to reattach that. So, I mean, it's not going to be wood glue. I'm going to do it with resin, but there you go. It's just going to be one more added aspect of character on this table. But as I was saying, I thought I would just keep it as one solid piece of wood and just make a solid wood table with some resin filling in wherever the gaps were. But once I realized that C-clamp just was not going to work, because I had thought maybe I will preserve it, using some deep penetrating epoxy so I can strengthen it and make it super strong. But I realized that's just not going to work. I'm going to have to slice this thing and make a resin river right down the middle somehow. This way I can flatten the whole thing out and it'll be a nice flat table. Because the way that entire piece of wood was, I wouldn't be able to flatten that whole thing out. I would lose way too much wood and it would be less than an inch. And I had to keep it at least at an inch. So now I'm just having to trim a little bit off the other piece. And I knew I would have to do this anyways to make it fit into the mold and into the sizes that I wanted. But besides that, right in the center there, you can't see it in these pictures. There was some really punky area there, and I was just hoping to go ahead and remove a couple inches from the center and not have to deal with that part of the wood. And there, as you can see, it's taking shape now. So I have my pieces cut out now. Now it's to do all the work of prepping it. And, removing bark is normal. That's a normal part of this process. The challenge with this one, it was just so punky, so much rot all over the place that I have to remove a lot of the rot, but there's parts of it that I'm going to be able to preserve once I start using that deep penetrating epoxy and strengthen that. But I need to make sure that I remove anything that's just gone. It's already too far. It's more like sawdust just sitting in there. So that's part of why this took so long. So all those little round holes you can see right there, those are all just bug holes, and there's a ton of them. And I had to dig them all out because they were full of sawdust or whatever the heck is that deposit that these bugs leave in it. Even though this project took a long time, it was extremely satisfying to take on such a difficult piece of wood and in essence preserve it, extend its lifespan. And here's my dental tool. I don't know why I actually enjoy this aspect. This is a very labor intensive part of any of these jobs. But pulling that dental tool out and starting to dig in there and pull, sometimes it's amazing when you start digging what you find and it connects to other holes. And but I enjoy this part because this is where you really get into the details. I don't rush it. I mean, I'm trying to do, as far as I'm concerned, this is a masterpiece. These are works of art. I'm not trying to just finish something to sell. I'm just trying to make something that looks nice, and I'm paying attention to all the details. See, part of the challenge of this, when using the chisel and you're cutting off the punky wood, and you see right there, I'm just digging because I can see the wood looks like, I think that's soft. Start digging into it, and sure enough, it's a hole. It looked fine before. So I will go with that little dento tool and just be picking and picking at the wood to see, is this soft wood here? Yep, dig it out. Because if you run over it with your hand, it feels solid. But if you dig with it, then you'll dig something out. And I mean, it's a risk because once you start poking into it, it may not be damaged wood, or it may not be punky, but now you just put a little prick hole into it. Now you got to do something with that. But as I was saying, when you start using that chisel and you start going on edges to get rid of the punky wood, you're going to create unnatural lines. And this is where, for me, I take my time. I will come back later and you'll see I will use a variety of tools. I'll use hand files, sandpaper, I have a grinder, so I'll use a grinder sometimes. I will use my Dremel tool with some real fine grinders on the tip, or sandpaper, real small sand disc on the Dremel tool, and I will take my time to reshape that area to make it look natural. And the average person will never even see it, but to me, I will see it. And I know if I see a beautiful piece of woodwork somewhere, I pay attention to details and I enjoy the details. So I don't know who 20, 30 years from now is going to be looking at this thing and they're going to see a small detail that no one else has even seen because I paid attention to the details. So what you see there, that's that part that fell off. And so now I'm having to file it down. I'm using that wire brush just to make sure that I get, see all that dust, that just rotted punkiness there. I need to get rid of all that punkiness. Just like it's just sawdust basically. And I'm trying to get rid of all of it. I'm going to have to do it on the main board and in the small piece because I'm going to use resin to, in essence, glue this back together. And so as you can see all that yellowish, dusty stuff, I have to get rid of it all because I need to make sure that these two pieces are going to stick. So when I use that deep penetrating epoxy, it's gonna be absorbed by all this punkiness, And that's how it's going to create that bond, because I made sure that I got rid of all of that rotted wood that's on the edge there. Now this portion here, that white wood, is it's beautiful. I love to keep that on, but in this case, it was just too punky. So I knew I had to remove this. It's going to create a problem if I leave it there. It's you know, I'm gonna all this is gonna get really strong once I put the penetrating epoxy. It's gonna become like, I don't know, fiberglass, plastic, and it wood becomes very strong once you put that deep penetrating epoxy. But I didn't want to take the risk in that portion, because that wood just felt too soft, and I was concerned that it wouldn't hold up for years, you know, decades. Whatever I'm making, I want it to last for decades. See, the more and more I was tapping on this, I would discover areas in the wood that was soft and other parts that were strong. So I'm just trying to get rid of anything that's soft, because I don't want it to interfere with the bonding of the resin and the potential for this thing to have a very long life. So using this file, part of why I use it is because it helps me to smoothen out that surface. That wire brush creates a lot of lines, and I don't like to have those lines there, because you never know when you're leveling out the resin how deep you're gonna go, and if you created lines in your bark area, it'll reappear. I've had that happen, so that's why now I make sure that all of that area I smooth it out enough so it doesn't look like there's unnatural lines in there. And now here I'm just using my Dremel with a real nice little grinding tip to shape some stuff. I'm able to get deeper into areas to remove some stuff that I'm testing to see, I mean, is that wood bad? But on the top portion there, that's the surface area. That's where you're going to actually be able to see where the resin's at. And all that carving made unnatural lines. So I'm using this to reshape the lines so that it looks more natural. And that's why that carving tip is a nice little round tip. It makes it easier for me to make it the edges, instead of having the sharp cuts from the chisel or from the file, I can smoothen it out and make it look more natural. So this is, once again, all those holes. I'm just digging for gold, finding all that rotted sawdust wood from the bugs that are in there, and I'm trying to make sure I get it all out, because once I pour the resin, the last thing I would want is for it to come loose and float up, and then it makes the resin look ugly because now you have like floating particles in it. But besides that, I want to dig all the way in as deep as I can get, all the way to the bottom of wherever the hole is, so that it'll fill up with resin. So in the end stage, all of those holes are going to have a lot of resin deep in it, and that becomes anchoring points, which makes it super strong so that the pieces are all well bond to each other. And any crack lines like this, I dig them out as well. You gotta get as deep as possible into those things so that they will fill up, so you don't have no sawdust or dirt or anything in there. But this way you can fill them up. And in some cases, if it's not very wide, I will actually dig it and make it wide. I'll intentionally make it wider, just so that I can get some more resin to get deeper in there to make it a stronger bond. That little clamping setup is not the best in the world, but it was a very inexpensive clamp I got from Harbor Freight. Just got an extra piece of plywood I had and drilled some holes in it and mounted it. It's actually not even fully mounted right. The bolts I have are too long. I haven't gone to Lowe's to get new bolts, but it works. So I have a small shop. So I have a 2-car garage. Half of it's taken up with a car for my son's car since he's on deployment. And so I have to be able to move my stuff around. And having that clamp there, that whole vise set up on a piece of wood, makes it easy for me to move it around. And I have other tools that way. I have a router table, a miter saw. Everything's mounted on these plywood boards that I can take them out and then clamp them to a table like this. So it just makes it portable. So in this section, it was basically a straight line, and I needed to get rid of that straight line. When it comes to resin rivers, I do not like it. To me, it's ugly if you have a segment of your river that's just a straight saw cut line. It's ugly. It's not natural, and the river is supposed to look natural. So what I'm doing in this case, I'm just using some good old elbow grease and an old file that I've had that file since the 80s, but I got it from my dad. So it's just one of the tools I love to use because it used to be my dad's and he's not with us anymore. So I'm just doing it the old way. I mean, the old way is you shape stuff by hand, and so I'm shaping it. I'm shaping it to try and make it look more natural so that when the resin is set there, it's going to have a wave to it versus being a straight line. So this is, once again, another segment where I'm repairing the line, because when I had to remove all the bark, it created unnatural lines because of the chisel. And so now I'm using the Dremel tool to go through here and just, I'm using both hands to kind of control what's going on here to try to make it more natural lines. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but because, you know, nature is kind of weird. Nature's not perfect straight lines, but I need to make it more natural. So that's why I use a Dremel. And here I am again, back to my dental work, digging out some more stuff. And even though this area here is going to be, most of this going to be buried with resin, I still want it to be fully cleaned out so that the resin gets deep in there. That air compressor, I got that from Lowe's, and you know, you get those on sale, you get a great deal, and it'll come with 3 or 2 nail guns, and it does more than enough work what you need for a small shop like this. So now I'm just doing some basic cleaning up on the wood as I'm preparing to coat it with deep penetrating epoxy. So I'm just leveling stuff out. I'm gonna clean it up a little bit because I want the resin to be to dig deep into it. So I'm just wiping this down with some water and trying to get a good feel so I can see if there's anything hidden, something I didn't see. So that's why I'm using the air compressor to blow off a lot of dust and clear out any of those holes. And then now I'm just drying the wood off. I'm going to let it dry a lot longer before I do anything else with it. But it's just allowing me to see what's going on with it and to see if there's any other touch-ups I have to do before I put the deep penetrating epoxy. So I'm putting some mold release in here. For whatever reason, I had actually prepped this mold thinking I was pouring the resin, and I didn't have to do all this because I was just doing the deep pour epoxy at this point. And but either way, I put some mold release because those boards are going to be there, and I don't want it to stick. Even though this mold, it's very good for stuff not to stick. I always use deep mold release. Makes it easier to remove it at the end. Camera angle wasn't that great in this scenario, but I just got some, I think this is Total Boat deep penetrating epoxy, and I'm just brushing it on. And I'm brushing it on nice and thick. Now this is already late at night. As you can see, it's pretty dark. The garage door is open there, and I have all these bugs that are starting to fly in, which is irritating as heck when you're dealing with resin. So if you don't know what deep penetrating epoxy is, it's epoxy resin that's very thin. And so because it's very thin, the wood will really absorb it. It'll go deeper into the wood. And so you want to put it on thick. And it takes, I don't know, 12 or so hours before it starts hardening. So because of that as well, it has more time to penetrate into the wood. And the stuff is great for any kind of punky, rotted type wood you have that you need to preserve, you need to make it stronger. It's great for that. And so in a scenario like this, I'm preserving the wood first. I'm strengthening and stabilizing the wood by putting this deep penetrating epoxy into it. And it's going to make it nice and strong. And then later on, I would then work with the wood because I don't want to be doing anything with it until I know it's strong. And once I put this stuff on, it's not going to be falling apart on me no more. It's going to be nice and strong. So now I can start handling it and doing stuff with it because I've made it nice and strong. And that's what this stage is. So this is now at least a day later, but I think it's more like a week or so later. But it's at least a few days. This is just deep penetrating epoxy. But whenever I do the actual full pours, I always leave my stuff in the mold for at least a week. But now I'm coming back and I'm going to pull everything out and re-prep it and get it ready for the actual real pour. Because I've just been preparing the wood. And like I said, I don't know why I over prepared. Well, I know why I over prepared this original, putting all the silicone, because in my mind I was thinking I was going to be pouring the deep pour epoxy, but that wasn't the time for that. So now this wood is strong. It's tough again because it's got all that epoxy deep into it. So I have to now start prepping the wood again. So part of what I have to do is sand everything down, because when I put the next coat of resin, it needs to be able to have a surface to grab to. So you want to sand this down to probably like 120 grit, something like that, so that you're creating a surface for the next coat of resin to bond to it. And that's why this part here, which is the live edge where the resin's going to be at, you have to make sure you sand all that down, because that's where they're going to be bonding. The two pieces are going to bond together through that. Plus, I have all the holes that are still there because I didn't fill it with the penetrating epoxy. I just coated it. So all those holes are still there, and I'm going to dig them out some more because those become anchor points that are going to get filled up with the deep pour epoxy once I do the final pour. So now I'm mixing the deep pour. This is the liquid glass, which is, to me, I love using this particular resin. And you can do several inches thick with this one. Now, I've installed a split AC heater into my garage so I can control the temperature in my garage to keep it nice and cool. But either way, with this resin, you can go really deep. You can go between 2 to 4 inches easily, in my experience. And I've seen people who have done some crazy stuff as much as 8 inches with this particular type of resin. So I'm just using a spoon there to kind of test it to see what the color, do I like the darkness. So as you can see, there's a lot of bubbles in this. I have a vacuum chamber so that I can suck all those bubbles out of it, but I don't always do that, especially on a pour like this, because this is going to take so long to cure that those little bubbles are not going to be a problem. And I think it's a 5-gallon vacuum that I have, but you don't really need to do it in a scenario like this. And all those bubbles, I'm going to wait probably like 30 or so minutes, come back, and then I'm going to use a torch to get rid of them, because all those small bubbles are going to start popping. As you can see there, most of them are gone already. There's just a few here and there. And I'll come back with the torch and pop them. I needed some more resin. I didn't mix enough, so. So I'm just using a plastic spoon to move some resin around, because there was areas that I needed some resin and it wasn't flowing all the way there, and I can just scoop some from somewhere else and put it there and accomplish the objective. And then just pop your bubbles. When I do these kind of pours, I tend to do it later at night, and then I'll spend the next 2 or 3 hours coming back every 30 minutes, an hour, and just checking to see any bubbles, and torch them and pop them. And then somewhere around the 8-hour mark, I make sure I check it again, but definitely by the 12th hour, because by that point you may not be able to pop bubbles anymore. So the first few hours I'll do that. Now, for some reason, somehow I must have lost the video of me actually applying the Monocoat, Rubio Monocoat, the stain to this thing. So I just skipped ahead. So now here, just mounting the legs. And you can't see it in here, but I installed some inserts into the wood. I always use inserts so that it makes it easier. So if whoever buys this, they can remove the legs if they're moving, and they don't damage the wood. So these legs are by Vivo, and I bought them from Amazon. I actually, in my office and in my wife's office, we have these Vivo desks. And so I was very familiar with how good this sit-rise legs work. And so that's why I went ahead and ordered them, because they're excellent. I've had them for years. I think the one in my office I've had for maybe 4 or 5 years now. Never had a problem with them. They work great. So I just bought the legs for that. And this particular set I think it was 220 pound or 320 pound lift capacity, and it has 3 programmable heights. So uh, typically for me, you have the sitting position and then and the standing position. Uh, that I've also set for my own desk like a third position where it's just a little bit above sitting, where I like to have more uh, clearance from my knees. But for the most part, you just need to make sure you have two levels, two height levels, so you can adjust it for the sitting and standing. All right, so now I'm done. Look at this thing. So, in my opinion, it's beautiful. I love all that punkiness and all those holes. You see all those black dots, and then the little river areas where the wood was cracking that I had to fill with black resin, and it just has so much character. The way it turned out, it's kind of like a little lake with a river. It's awesome, and as you can see there, it's sit rise. So you hit the number at which I had it at number 2, goes all the way up to the top, and hit number 1, it goes all the way back down to the bottom. So I guess this looks like it has three programmable heights. But look at that character there in the wood. I think this is awesome. To me, something like this just says so much more. There's a story here, and that's why I love to work with this kind of funky, punky, damaged wood that needed someone to preserve it to so they could have another life.